How much money do you actually need to retire? Most people will tell you the number is somewhere around $1.5 million. And if you have seen that figure floating around in magazine articles, in YouTube thumbnails, from a well-meaning co-worker who just started contributing to their 401k, you're probably not wrong to have heard it. According to Northwestern Mutual's 2026 Planning and Progress study, the average American now believes they need $1.46 million saved to retire comfortably. That number is up $200,000 from just last year. But here's the thing. That number is based on a feeling, a collective financial anxiety, not on how most Americans actually retire. And once you dig into the real data, from the Social Security Administration, from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, from the Federal Reserve, a very different story starts to emerge. A story that might just change how you look at your own retirement picture entirely. Because the gap between what people fear and what the data actually shows is wider than almost anyone realizes. Let's start by getting clear on what we're actually talking about. Social Security is a monthly benefit paid to retired workers based on their lifetime earnings history. You have been paying into it your entire working life through payroll taxes out of every single paycheck. And when you retire, at 62, at 67, or even at 70, you start collecting. Most people treat it as a small supplement, a little extra cushion sitting on top of the enormous pile of personal savings they're supposed to have already built. But that assumption may be driving years of unnecessary financial anxiety and stress. Here's where the first number lands. According to the Social Security Administration, the average monthly retirement benefit for a retired worker in 2025 is $1,976 a month. That comes out to roughly $23,700 a year. For a single person, that number sounds modest at first glance. But most people heading into retirement aren't navigating it alone. So let's look at what this actually means for a typical married household. If both spouses worked and both qualify for Social Security, which is extremely common among the current generation of retirees, the average combined monthly benefit for an aged couple, both receiving benefits, is approximately $3,089 a month. That is more than $37,000 a year, coming in automatically, guaranteed by the federal government, for life. And that amount increases every single year with cost of living adjustments that are tied directly to inflation. Most people get this wrong, but once you see it, it will all make sense. That $37,000 a year from Social Security sounds modest, until you compare it directly to what retirees actually spend out in the real world. According to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, households led by someone aged 65 or older spent an average of $61,432 in 2024. That works out to roughly $5,720 a month. Now yes, there is a gap there, and that gap matters. But here's where things get interesting in a good way. That $61,432 average includes every retired household in the country. Households in high-cost cities. Households still paying rent or a mortgage. Households carrying credit card debt or car payments they brought right into retirement. When you look specifically at households that are mortgage-free, and the majority of retirees are mortgage-free by their late 60s, typical monthly spending looks materially lower than that headline average suggests. And we're not talking about a stripped-down life of sacrifice. We're talking about the actual lifestyle most retirees report living, when you look at what the real survey data shows. Here's where things change. The Employee Benefit Research Institute's 2024 Retirement Confidence Survey found that 62% of actual retirees, people who are living retirement right now, report that Social Security is a major source of their income. Not a footnote, not a supplement, a major source. Gallup data collected across a 5-year window between 2019 and 2024 confirms it. 58% of retired Americans call Social Security a major source of their retirement income. That is nearly 6 out of every 10 retired Americans living in a way that the conventional savings advice says isn't possible. So what is actually going on here? The answer comes down to something called replacement rates. A replacement rate is simply the percentage of your pre-retirement income that you need to replace in order to maintain your standard of living after you stop working. The conventional wisdom, the rule you have probably heard repeated for decades, says you need to replace 70 to 80% of your pre-retirement income. And that assumption is exactly where the $1.46 million number is built from. But here's the thing. That 70 to 80% figure was designed to account for your working life expenses, your commuting costs, your work wardrobe, your payroll taxes that you no longer owe once you retire, the retirement contributions you are making right now every single month. When you stop working, most of those expenses evaporate. Research from the Congressional Budget Office found that for workers born in the 1960s, the median Social Security replacement rate, measured against actual career earnings, lands closer to 55%. Not 40%, which is the figure you typically hear. 55%. And this is where things get genuinely interesting. For lower and middle earners, which describes the overwhelming majority of working Americans, Social Security's formula is intentionally progressive. The system puts more weight on your lower earning years in the calculation. According to Social Security Administration actuaries, a worker with average career earnings around $72,000 a year can expect Social Security to replace approximately 41% of their pre-retirement income. But for someone earning closer to $32,000 a year, again, a massive share of the American workforce, that replacement rate climbs to 55%. The program was designed to do the heaviest lifting for people in the middle and lower end of the earnings spectrum. Once you understand that, the $1.46 million magic number starts to look like a completely different problem. Here is the practical math. If a retired married couple is bringing in $37,000 a year from Social Security, which is the current average for an aged couple both receiving benefits, per SSA data, they need to close a gap of roughly $24,000 annually to reach that $61,000 average spending figure. Using a standard 4% annual withdrawal rate, generating $24,000 a year in supplemental income requires a savings base of around $600,000, not $1.46 million, not even halfway there. Now, $600,000 is still a real and significant number. Nobody here is suggesting retirement is free, but it represents a fundamentally different challenge than the one most working Americans believe they are up against. For couples who have paid off their homes or who live with more modest spending habits, that number narrows even further. For single retirees with lower baseline expenses, Social Security combined with a smaller savings foundation can realistically provide a stable, dignified retirement. And there is one more number worth knowing before we wrap this up. According to the Federal Reserve's report on the economic well-being of US households, 80% of retirees reported being able to do at least okay financially in 2023. 80%. Not the panicked, underfunded retirement that the headlines keep predicting. The actual lived reality, not the anxious projection, is that most people who reach retirement discover it is far more manageable than they feared while they were still grinding through their working years. Here is the honest takeaway from all of this. Social Security is not a rounding error in your retirement plan. For most American households, it is the single most valuable financial asset they will ever hold. It adjusts for inflation every single year. It cannot be wiped out by a market correction, and it cannot be outlived. The conventional wisdom says you need $1.46 million to retire. But the actual data, from the SSA, from the BLS, from the Federal Reserve, says that for median income American households, Social Security plus a realistic personal savings target gets most people where they genuinely need to go. None of this means you should save less. Save more whenever you can. That will never be wrong advice. But it does mean you may not be as far behind as the headlines have been telling you. So here is the question I want to leave you with today. When you picture your retirement plan, are you actually counting Social Security as a real number, or have you quietly been leaving it out, assuming it won't be enough to matter? Drop your answer in the comments below, because how you answer that single question will tell you almost everything about how you have been approaching your financial future.